the year 1453. You're a Greek-speaking person that's living in Constantinople, in modern-day Turkey. You're part of the Byzantine Empire, and this empire has been in existence for centuries. You could honestly put it at over 1,000 years if you add the entire time the Roman Empire occupied this territory. But the Roman Empire split into two, and out of it you had the Western, ruled by Rome, you had the Eastern, ruled in Constantinople. And it was during this split that the Byzantine Empire was really born. The Byzantine Empire ruled a vast array of area, spanning modern-day Turkey, the Middle East, stretching down through the Promised Land, and it was constantly having to defend its borders from Muslim invaders. This happened century after century after century. And now, in the year 1453, on May 29th, that empire finally fell. Imagine yourself on the wall, seeing the city that had withstood attacks for over 1,000 years finally coming to an end that day. That day, 4,000 people were killed, and over 30,000 were enslaved for domestic servants, sex slaves, or sold off into other parts of the Ottoman Empire that conquered Constantinople. With the fall of Constantinople and the fall of the Byzantine Empire, you had thousands of Christian refugees fleeing from Constantinople and the surrounding areas from the Islamic Turks. And they all fled to the west, towards Italy, France, Germany. And out of them, they were all many of these Christians were carrying Greek manuscripts that they had preserved through the eras. And these are the same refugees that come from the churches that you find in Revelation and in some of the letters of Paul, Ephesus, Sardis, all these churches right around the edge of Turkey today, modern-day Turkey or Asia Minor. So they carried these Greek manuscripts to the West, who had not had any of these Greek manuscripts. And it was out of these Greek manuscripts that the Reformation truly begun. So the Constantinople fell in 1453. The Reformation began in 1517. So just over 50 years later, when all these refugees carrying their beloved New Testament Greek manuscripts came to the West. With the sudden appearance of these Greek manuscripts, the leaders of the Reformation, people like Erasmus, began to translate these codexes, or these manuscripts, into English and all of the surrounding nations. And that's where we get the King James Bible, the Geneva Bible, and all the ensuing Bibles have their roots from this moment. And that is where the Texus Receptus comes from, the received text. Because the Byzantine Empire had been holding on to these manuscripts for centuries. They had been received by the church, the apostolic churches, that were founded by Paul, that were founded by John. Those churches were the ones that received the text from the original apostles themselves, preserved them through the ages, and then, with the fall of Constantinople, fled and transferred those same manuscripts into the West, and were translated for us today, where we get our Bibles, at least the King James Bible and those that go by the Texus Receptus and not the critical text. So the rallying cry of the reformers now they had broke away from Rome, the Catholic system, where you had the Pope, one man in charge of the church. And they were really in charge of the Bible. It was all in Latin. So the rallying cry of the reformers was Sola Scriptura. Scripture alone. That dictates how we should live, what we should follow, and our faith as a whole. So now that we had all these manuscripts flooded in from the East, we were able to translate them to where we were able to say, now we don't have to go to the state, which was the Catholic Church at this time. At that time, there was still a marriage between church and state. And the Catholic Church had it where you would have to go to them for them to tell you what Scripture says. No more. From this moment on, we were going to have the Scriptures in our own hands. We were going to hold it. And we were going to be able to look for ourselves on what it actually said. No longer is man going to be in charge of the church, but the Scripture, the God-breathed Scripture. And so out of that, you have the Reformation, and every single Reformed church from that moment has its roots in this event in 1453. One of the worst events you could ever imagine happening if you had lived through that time. Yet God turned it into one of the greatest events in history for church, because out of it you had the most evangelism in history. You had revivals. You had the spreading of the gospel throughout the world from this moment, with the received text of the apostolic churches made its way into the hands of the reformers.